Hello, everybody out there. This is the progress report for Wednesday, July 31st, the last day of July. Summer's speeding on, isn't it? My God, we wait so long and it goes so fast, doesn't it?
It sure does. It sure does.
And I want to apologize, folks, for not being here for last week's show. We had a little
you don't have to
miscommunication.
apologize. You were away on assignment.
I was
a fact-finding mission.
I was on assignment. Had a wonderful trip out to the west on the Amtrak. And I thought I might just mention that the Amtrak trains, and this was the California Zephyr from Chicago, and we got off in the first California stop called Truckee, which is real next to Lake Tahoe. Beautiful place. But the train was very late, and they were late day after day after day, and the reason was, I think it was climate change. Because you get into the Mississippi River area, Iowa, and Nebraska.
Hot enough to soften the steel, huh?
The water table was too high. They had to slow down the train because they were worried about track stability.
Oh, yeah, you were mentioning water as well.
And then you go up high to cross the Continental Divide and go along the Colorado River. And then they had to, of course, there's a lot of this in the train there, so it doesn't go very fast. And they slowed it down more because of high heat, the danger of deforming the rails. So, it's happening, and it affected our schedule. I didn't care.
So, Bob, here we have a conflict of two of your favorite policies. You have a conflict between climate change and commuter rail. And can one survive the other, So it's I find that interesting. Those are two of your hot-button issues.
They certainly are. But, they have a beautiful observation car with seats that can swivel around. You can look here and there, look down. Oh, there's Donner Pass. Remember the Donner Party? They told us all about the Donner Party without mentioning that they ended up as cannibals.
That first part of the story is great.
Left that out. Probably didn't want to interfere with business in the dining car, and it was just great. And there's a tradition on the Zephyr, the California Zephyr. As you're going along beside the Colorado River in a place where there's pretty much nobody there except the train and people rafting on the river, there's a Zephyr salute.
Yes, you mentioned it in an email. You did not provide any illustrations.
I did not provide illustrations.
I imagined what it could be.
You imagined correctly. They sort of moon you on the rafts.
Well, that's not exactly what I imagined, but now I have a much better picture.
And the conductor advises we do not reciprocate. So
Boy,
anyway,
I would have had a real hard time heeding his instructions on that one. I think, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, enough for my wonderful trip to Lake Tahoe, and then further up the coast to Seattle and another train. We are gearing up because, folks, there's lots happening in New Hampshire right now. We had a presidential debate last night, the second edition.
Another one
10
tonight.
more candidates tonight's. I imagine many of you out there, because a lot of people that watch this show, like we are political junkies, we wouldn't miss it. But we have to remember that not only is there a contest for President of the United States well into its rush to the finish line, it's going to come faster than you can believe, but we have municipal elections this year.
It's an odd-numbered year.
It's an odd-numbered year. We have elections every year in New Manchester, New Hampshire, and this year it's the municipal elections. And we're gonna try and feature as many of the candidates running for local office as we can on the progress report. And I'm happy to say we have one right here.
Yeah.
Mike Farley.
Yep.
He's running for Alderman Ward 8.
I am running for Alderman Ward 8. Yep.
How about that?
I made the final decision on the last day of filing.
I'm very excited about that.
Well, I humbly offer myself, I guess is the way I'd put it. That's kind of my position on it. I don't think anyone should get a free pass, and so we'll make a fight of it. I have a feeling it is going to be a rock'em sock'em battle, but we'll see how it goes.
We will indeed, and we'll hear more from you on that. But I'm very pleased to say that we also have here with us Chris Potter, who is running for the Board of School Committee from Ward 7, and he's here with us tonight.
My neighboring ward.
And so, Chris, thank you for coming down and joining us.
Thank you for
excited
having me.
that you're running. I believe this is your first attempt to seek elective office, and you appear to be a young fellow, which is great. We want you probably are active with the Young Dems, are you?
Yes, I am. I'm also 29, so a little older than I look.
Oh, you are older than you look, but still pretty young. For me, you're young.
Don't knock it.
And it's just great. And Chris, I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself to our viewers out there.
Sure. So I originally came to Manchester in 2012 to be a member of City Year. Served at Beach Street Elementary School. Really enjoyed the opportunity to serve and be immersed in that culture of City Year, of idealism and community. Found that it was a real joy to be surrounded by people who influenced me to be a better person because we were all there serving together.
Talking about your fellow City Year people?
Yeah, exactly. And really fell in love with Manchester. I mean, Manchester is a beautiful city where you kind of have everything you need, but it's small enough that you can get to know people and see people around town. So after my year in City Year, I did another internship in St. Louis as a community organizer. I got to work with students who were fighting for renovations to a local park and banning suspensions in their elementary school because of the connection between suspensions and the school-to-prison pipeline. We had some good wins in St. Louis, and then when I left St. Louis...
How do you do away with suspensions in school? That's not an essential part of a discipline problem in school? Or what was the project there?
They switched to in-house suspensions for
see.
students in grades K to 3, which meant that parents didn't have to take time off from work, and students were still getting an education.
I see.
What the district there was doing was just suspending troublemaking kids, and then they were falling behind academically, and it was really putting them on a path to failure
that
in
becomes
life.
a spiral.
That becomes a snowball effect.
Exactly.
I guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So we got them to switch to in-school suspensions, which was a big success for that whole community, because it gives those kids a better
The
shot.
whole school district in St. Louis?
Is the Normandy School District to the north of St. Louis, which is
see.
actually where a lot of the poverty and segregation is in the St. Louis region.
I want to hold you up. I don't mean to interrupt, but you dropped yourself into Manchester in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Fully formed, fully educated. I
Not
want to
at
know a
all.
little bit more about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go
Yeah.
to school? Tell us a little bit more. We're gonna probe you with real tough questions here.
Sure. To go all the way back, I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, to two ethicists, moral philosophers, and both professors.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is, and I don't know why you left that out, because that is, I can't wait to talk about that.
Well, it's like being a preacher's kid, practically. So I went to college at UMass Amherst. Really enjoyed the social scene there, but found that I was feeling very unfulfilled by the partying and things, and realized that if I wanted to feel okay with myself internally, I had to start serving more. So I worked at the homeless shelter there, the Amherst Survival Center, and then was accepted into City Year, and kind of turned around my day-to-day practice of life towards the end of college.
So how many years in City Year for you?
So I was 1 year as a core member, then went to St. Louis,
Yeah.
finished the community organizing, and biggest break of my life was able to come back as a staff member for City Year, and I've served the last 4 years as the impact manager at Parker Varney Elementary School, where I manage the core members and work with the teachers, observing and coaching core members, setting up the list of students that they work with, planning events, things like that.
Really good.
So kind of
really
a more
good.
management level. You had several
Yeah.
people that you were overseeing and helping mentor, actually.
Yeah, so the whole team at Parker Varney, the last 4 years, we've had about 7 or 8 each year.
Yeah. Well, we have a call.
We
Let's
do.
see if Eddie's wants to contribute. Hi, Eddie. Welcome to the Progress Report. Glad to have you back.
Hello?
How are you, Eddie?
Hi, Eddie.
Hey.
Hey.
I got a couple of quick questions, if I could, real brief.
Sure.
Have
Happy
at
to
it.
have you.
Okay. All right. Hey, Mike, my first one is for you. It's about an observation was made about you, and I want to get your input on it. Gerard had noted how you host this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you essentially only take liberal guests. You never have conservative guests on your show. But yet now you're stepping forward and you're saying you want to be the alderman for Ward 8, right?
Fair enough.
Right. Am I right so far?
I think that's a good characterization of the show. I don't think we've made any bones about it that we come from a particular point of view.
Okay. Does this seem a bit odd or interesting that you exclude conservative guests, but now you're stepping forward and saying to the folks of Ward 8, you want their vote so that you can be the alderman?
Well, here we go. I knew the attacks would start soon. No,
Not an attack, Mike.
it doesn't
I want to get your input.
It doesn't cause me any heartburn whatsoever. People know me. People know where I'm coming from. People know that my intention for the city of Manchester is to help. And that's all I've done pretty much my whole life is try to help. So, I offer myself to the people of Ward 8. I offer myself to all of the voters of Ward 8 and all the people who don't vote in Ward 8. If they feel that I'm someone who can help them, then I hope they'll vote for me. If they don't, then they don't. I don't see that as a real issue. And in fact, I think it gives folks an opportunity to get to know me better.
Very well, fair enough. We'll move on from that. And I'll ask your guest if he could just give his input on the Manchester tax cap, and I'll hang up and listen for his answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for calling, Eddie.
Your input on the tax cap.
Yeah, running for school board, I won't be voting on the city budget. So I offer my opinion not as a candidate, but simply as a citizen. I think that the budgets that the aldermen have passed the last 2 years have been pretty much in the public interest. They've been right on. And I'm really glad to see that a veto-proof majority passed both. It really shows me that the aldermanic board is operating pretty effectively, which is why I'm running for school board and not alderman. I would say that the best thing that we can do as a city with the tax cap is to eliminate the revenue cap, keep the tax cap, but instead of being attached to the consumer price index, attach it to the municipal cost index.
Which is a more appropriate scale of how costs to run a municipality fluctuate as opposed to the fluctuation of consumer costs, which is a totally different thing. And that gets to something that I've always had a pet peeve about. When government tries to say we should budget like people at their kitchen table, it sounds great, but it's not true.
Yeah.
You can't budget a government like you budget a family. It's a different entity with different requirements. So
Yeah. So, your background with City Year is very interesting and good. I like the fact that you've been involved in this. Clearly, you're a person that wants to make a real contribution. And I don't think a lot of people really understand what City Year is and what they contribute to this city. I think a lot of people just don't know about that. Can you talk about that a little bit? How long have they been here? How many are here? And how's it all work?
Yeah, I'm glad to. So City Year is an incredible program. It's been a huge impact in my life. Basically, we have about 70 core members here in Manchester, and we serve at 8 schools, 8 elementary schools, the highest need schools in Manchester. And the core members are full-time volunteers, which means they get there at 7:30 in the morning and they're there till 5:30 p.m. They are tutors and mentors and role models for the students. They follow a very strict code of behavior. They don't jaywalk, they don't drink, they don't smoke tobacco, they don't swear. And they form really close personal relationships with the students. Students frequently feel very comfortable with the core members. They are an emotional support. They're able to take students out of the classroom when they're being disruptive so that the other 25 students in the class can continue learning. And in that way, they're really vital supports for the teachers. But then they also give individualized support in the areas that are correlated with dropping out. So there are 4 areas: chronic absenteeism, misbehavior, failing English, and failing math. So we identify students who are showing those warning signs of dropping out and give them personalized instruction from the core member with targeted learning objectives to get that student back up to grade level or no longer chronically absent so that they're on track to graduate. Because if they can get to 10th grade without showing any of those warning signs of dropping out, they're 4 times more likely to graduate on time than if they have even one of those warning signs. So it's a really impactful program and an essential thing for Manchester because we lack so much
Yeah.
staff here.
Yeah.
It's a really good value for
I
the
bet
city.
the teachers just love it when they see
They
you
do.
young
And
people.
I
do.
wanted to ask that, how does City Year coordinate with the schools? Do they report to the principal?
Yeah.
Do they do their own thing, separate and apart? How does that mesh?
Oh no, it's very much a partnership. So that was my job as the impact manager. So the impact managers meet with the principal usually about once a week to coordinate on upcoming events, to give and receive feedback on our service. I meet with the teachers regularly, and then observe and coach the core members on their instruction and their whole class support. And then use team meetings and data reviews to help the core members improve their service.
Wow. So how do you feel about what you've been able to do here? Again, it must have been inspirational for you because you're seeking to be a part of the governing
Yeah.
body of the school district.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the 4 years I did. I don't think there's any better way I could have spent this part of my life. Now what I want to do is support the administration to make the systemic changes it needs to make sure that our students have good opportunities. Because serving at Parker Varney the last 4 years, I got to see a lot of the challenges that students were coming in with, the homelessness, the poverty, the trauma, the drug addiction in families. And I think there's a lot more that our schools can do to support those students to make sure that they receive a good education and are prepared to be productive, fulfilled Manchester citizens.
Yeah. Well, we're being told it's time for our first break.
It is.
I'd like to go on with Chris. I think
Do you
he's
want to
got
stay through the break
Can you-
and
can
take
you-
a little bit of
Can you
extra
stay
time?
a little longer and
Sure.
talk with us a little more?
Yeah.
All right, we'll
Let's
take a quick break.
Let's take
we'll
a quick
regroup
break, and we're very happy to have you here.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back, folks. If you want to participate, 640-3091. We have an outstanding young and even younger looking candidate for the Board of School Committee in Ward 7 with us, and we're learning a lot. So we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. This is the progress report for this last Wednesday in the month of July.
But the first Wednesday in election season.
Is it?
Well, maybe not the first, but we're kicking off our election season coverage here on the
Yeah.
Progress
Anyway,
Report.
if you're just joining us, we are very pleased to have with us an outstanding candidate for school committee man in Ward 7, and that's Chris Potter, who's certainly knows the subject of what needs to be done in the Manchester schools. He's been a city year volunteer at two of our schools, Beach Street and Parker Varney. Has found that very rewarding to help some of the students with the most needs, frankly, that attend these schools, among others in the city, but certainly these schools. And he's been sharing that with us, and yet now he's ready to take on the, as he puts it, the systemic issues in the Manchester School District by being a part of the governing board, the Board of School Committee. And let's talk about that. You're running for office for the first time?
I am,
I
yeah.
love that you're doing it. It's great. And tell us why you're doing it. And I guess it has to do with what you see as systemic changes, not just dealing with these problems student by student.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as rewarding as City Year was, working directly with the students, I saw, I see that the school district has the capability to reallocate resources on a much greater scale than you can do in any one schoolhouse. And given the full student body of the district, I'd like to be able to positively impact all those students by working with the board. I mean, one simple thing would be taking the innovations that I got to see at Parker Varney and bringing them district-wide. We did some really incredible stuff under Amy Allen when she was the principal there.
Well, wasn't that the time when the Parker Varney got an award for the top
Yeah, we
elementary
did.
school in the state
Yep.
of New Hampshire?
Absolutely.
That's a real great feather in a lot of people's caps. I assume
Yeah.
principally the principal, but many others at that school too. So yeah, I'm really pleased to hear about that. What are some of those things that were so innovative that you want to see
Yeah.
advanced?
So a couple different things. The first one is project-based learning. So this is kind of the opposite of what we did in the 20th century, when you had kids sitting in rows, they responded to bells, the teacher stood at the front, and the kids memorized facts. Project-based learning is much more dynamic. Kids work in teams so that they learn skills like collaboration, teamwork, communication, critical thinking, and they work on a project over the long term, practice perseverance, see something come to fruition. And they learn skills like writing and math through the project. So for one, the class tried to figure out how to support foster students in our community. And so for math, they researched things on Amazon and multiplied costs and subtracted costs and things like that. And then for writing, they wrote a proposal, a persuasive writing piece to get a grant. So they learn all these skills, but through a project and learn that way. And it's much better preparation for the kinds of 21st century careers that students will be going into.
And this answers the question that kids in the 18th century, like myself, when we were learning at those rows of schools, always asked, how does this impact me in the real world? When will I ever use this in the real
Yeah.
world? We asked that question about just about every lesson that teacher at the front of the room, in my case, dressed in a black and white habit, was telling us. And this actually, you see it as you go.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing
Yeah.
math for an hour. You're getting a little math here and there through the process.
Yeah, we still have regular math class too. So for example, you'd have your math core, your reading core instruction, and then you would have targeted math and targeted reading, and then project-based learning. And you can also do things like science and social studies through project-based learning, which is good, because those unfortunately have been pretty much eliminated from the elementary school curriculum. The other thing with the targeted instruction is we now have data that it's easy to collect in a way that we couldn't in past years, where you can identify exactly the learning objectives that a student hasn't yet mastered, and then teach them exactly those skills. So you have this spreadsheet of all of the different academic standards for the grade, and you can see which ones they've got, which ones they can do, which ones they can't. And then you can take all the students who haven't mastered this learning objective and teach them a small group lesson so that they master those skills, and they much more quickly progress back up to grade level. That's because if you just teach one lesson to the whole class, it's going to be boring for some kids, and some kids aren't going to get it, and it's going to go over their head.
Which was another problem. You'd have
Yeah.
a lot of the troublemakers were the kids that might be a little bit more gifted, a little bit more advanced, because they were bored while the rest of the class was catching up with something that 2 examples on the math page, and they had it figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you become a member of the Board of School Committee, what will be your policy priorities for the district as a whole? You'll be now governing the whole district.
So implementing that kind of targeted instruction and project-based learning would definitely be one. The other thing that addresses the issues I was seeing in the student body, the poverty and lack of role models and the trauma, would be community schools. community schools are a hub for the entire community instead of just an academic place. So obviously you still have your academics, but then you also have health and human services support, so more social workers. If a student can't see the board, math class isn't going to be very effective for him or her.
Right.
So you might have an external partnership with a nonprofit in the community to come in and offer vision care for students. You might have parent education, and parent engagement is another key part of community schools. So that's a model that we're actually already doing. Beach Street and Gosler Park are already community schools, but I would want it to be implemented better and more broadly.
Some of the big issues that come up about Manchester and its school district are, number one, unlike Concord, our school district does not have its own financing authority. We're dependent on here. You can make all the great decisions about the schools, but to the extent those decisions are going to be funded, that's up to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We had a bill in the legislature this year by our good friend, sponsored by our good friend Pat Long, to begin the process of authorizing the Manchester School District to have its own funding authority, which I understand is the case in the city of Concord. What do you think about that?
I would need to look more into that. My first reaction would be to support it because the school board knows the most about the students' needs. But I would want to talk to the aldermen and others in the community.
And there's been a big push currently, but led by people like the folks at Granite State Organizing Project, to arrange for student representation on the Board of School Committee. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Unquestionably, yes.
Very good. Let's see. Redistricting of the schools.
That's a big one that we've
that's a
been
big
trying
one.
to do for years and years and years.
Where are we at on that, and what do you think we need to do to make that happen, and should it happen?
Sure. So this year on the west side, we moved the 5th grade to Parkside Middle School because the elementary schools are overcrowded. At Northwest, we're teaching small group literacy lessons in a boiler room with like heavy machinery going over here.
Right.
Yeah, Northwest was crowded
Northwest
the day
as
it
a school
opened.
is growing like crazy. That's my word.
Right.
I know that.
And by the
Yeah.
way, I want to say that the teachers and staff at Northwest Elementary School are fantastic.
They are, yeah.
Superlative, awesome, couldn't ask for better. They do more with less than just about anybody I know. They're absolutely fantastic over
Yeah.
there. Every chance I get, I want to praise those people because they do a great job.
Yeah, it's
And,
not just Northwest. There's a bunch of
well,
schools
that's
that-
fine, but
Yeah.
poor old Northwest, chronically overcrowded, challenging student body, and these people work very hard, and they do a great job for every one of those
They
kids.
absolutely do, yeah. So as far as redistricting goes, you've got all that room at West.
Yeah.
I think we're off to a good start moving the 5th grade to Parkside. Something like moving 8th grade to West might be the logical next step, but there are many people who know more about it than I do.
Well, maybe you're not the person to ask the question, but I got to ask. They've been playing around with where they draw the line, where the groups of kids go together, and quite frankly, I think 5th graders in a middle. I'm not so sure, but maybe I'm just being traditional. But I thought that the old model of 6 years, then 2 years, then 4 years was effective forever. Now that's 20th century education. What's your thought on that? How do we modernize that? Is my idea really antiquated? Has childhood development so radically changed that these groupings of children is better now?
Right. I mean, the key thing is the physical maturation of students. So you don't want physically mature kids with kids who are much younger. That could pose some issues. I think that at Parkside they're taking some really smart steps, like they're having recess at a different time for the 5th graders. The 5th graders are in their own wing. So I think the principals and staff are thinking in advance of how to accommodate the age difference, and they're taking the right steps. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with that.
So, tell us a little about your campaign. You got an opponent.
Yes.
What are you doing to win this election?
Right. So I'm running against Bill Shea. Bill Shea is the current alderman. He's been the alderman for 24 years.
Yeah, a long time service.
Before that, he was principal of Hallsville Elementary School, which is in our neighborhood, from 1964 to 1996.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I really respect his service. He's been invested in the Manchester community a long time, and I don't want to knock him at all. But some of the things I was saying about 21st century education, not lining kids up in rows, being able to teach them targeted learning objectives, he and I have very different concepts of what education should look like in terms of preparing students for our current job opportunities. Like, we have all of these great jobs in the mill yard with tech firms.
Yeah.
I don't think a 20th century pre-digital model of education is going to prepare those students for success.
Yeah.
So as much as I respect Bill Shea, I don't think he should be on the school
Yeah,
board.
time for newer, younger ideas. Although I have to say, Chris, I've seen reform efforts come and go. It seems like everybody's always trying to reform education.
Yeah.
Several years ago, one of the great reforms was to tear down the classroom walls and
Yeah.
have everybody taught, teachers going from this level to that level.
Open concept.
Open
Yeah.
concept.
Open concept. Green
It was a-
Acres School was
it-
built as an open concept
It was a
school.
disaster, and now we're
Yeah.
just having to finally get the last schools that were built to serve that model. One was Beach Street, I know.
Yeah.
And, back to we undo that. So, there's a you got to be careful about your reforms. Are they really reforms, or are they just fads and
Yeah.
not serving education?
And I think that kind of plays into where I was trying to go. I have marbles in my mouth or something, but with the shifting of the groupings of the kids when they went from 6 to 2, and then they had the middle school model, and now they're kind of expanding that, and maybe putting 8th graders in the high schools. It seems to me like it's sometimes a flavor of the day.
We're still teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah, got to do that.
We
This
still
guy
are
cuts through the
absolutely-
garbage, doesn't he? He gets right
Yeah.
to the point.
But it's also about critical thinking. And how do you teach a kid to learn through their whole life?
Yeah.
And it's not just memorizing state capitals and times tables, but creating a passion for learning, developing the skills to work collaboratively in a team.
Yeah.
I think we can do a better job with those things.
And where do you see your own life going after you, let's say you're
Yeah.
successful, you become a member of the Manchester Board of School Committee, you make an impact, and what do you see yourself doing 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, Manchester's it for me. I left St. Louis as an organizer and saw some of the work that I was doing there disintegrate. The next guy who came on was like a drama guy, and I had organized kids around basketball, and they all kind of left the organization. So I said, all right, if I want to make a difference somewhere, I have to stay put. And I had already been to Manchester, loved Manchester, and this is it for me. I'm staying in this community.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We're better off for it regardless
We are
of how it
excited to
happens.
hear that.
Yes,
We're a young guy
very
with
much.
a commitment to the education
Very
of our
much,
students.
because hey, nothing happens in
Yeah.
Manchester if activist people don't get involved and help out.
Yeah.
This city is run on volunteers, and when we see another person that wants to stick around and
Yeah, we
grab
love
an
it.
oar and
We
pull,
love it.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So we're
Absolutely
going to have to wrap
fantastic.
up because we got another break coming up. But tell us, how people can help your campaign. What's your campaign about? And
Sure.
Do you
how
have a
can people get
Facebook
involved?
page, a phone number?
Yeah.
How can folks get in touch with you?
The best thing for people to do is to go to facebook.com/cpottermht. That's Manchester hashtag MHT. Or just search Chris Potter for school board. And there you can find the link to donate or volunteer. We're having a big canvas launch on Saturday, trying to get 500 doors, which is about
That's
half
ambitious.
the voters on the left in Ward 7. So if you're free on Saturday, please come help.
Where's that all going to gather?
We're leaving from the mayor's campaign office on Mammoth Road at
Okay.
1 p.m. But the event page is there on the Facebook page.
Okay. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
This has really been terrific. I'm
Yeah.
certainly glad to get to know you. I mean, you're a person obviously of skills and high ideals and commitment, and we love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. You bet.
Glad to have
Good
you.
luck.
Thanks for helping us kick off our campaign coverage.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We
Couldn't be
appreciate
better.
it.
All right, we'll take another quick break. This will be our final break, and then we'll get Rick Maynard on to talk about what's going on with the Charter Commission, right?
No, we're going to talk about all the races.
All the races. Okay.
All the races. We'll list the candidates and have some opinions.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is the progress report for the last day of July, Wednesday, July 31st, and we've just said goodbye to what I thought was an outstanding candidate and a really terrific young man who's committed to the city of Manchester and particularly to the education of our
He
youth.
brings a lot to the table.
He
doesn't
brings a lot to the table, and the fact that he loves Manchester makes me love him. I mean, see a young guy like that who's obviously really about
Yeah,
making
unfortunately, we
contributions.
see a lot of young folks kind of looking around for other places to live. It's really nice to see someone that
Yeah.
wants to stick
Yeah,
around
and he's-
and contribute.
And he's had experience of other places, so
And
this
he's
is really
excited
exciting.
about it.
He's
Yeah.
excited about it. But now we want to get on to a general survey of the lineup for the municipal elections, and I'm going to turn it over to Rick and Mike to see how things are looking.
Sure, Rick, you want to lead off, or do you want me? We can just go down the ticket. You've probably seen Rich Gerard on his show on Thursdays has been kind of running down the ticket, so maybe some of this you've heard. But we do have a primary election that's going to be coming up in September because several races had more candidates filed than are available on the spot. But not every race is going to have a primary,
Right.
but the mayor's race certainly will. We have three people running: Victoria Sullivan on Joyce Craig, the incumbent mayor, and Glenn R.J. Willett, who calls himself the People's Mayor and runs pretty much every election.
He's a hardy perennial, isn't he?
He throws his hat in the ring, and I love anybody who volunteers. So I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of tough, Mike. I mean, there's the amount of people. There's 14 pages, and there's 37 people alone that went for the Charter Commission. And we go with 20 minutes. Oh my God!
Well, let's go through it. I mean, you want to go through the wards first?
Sure.
Why don't we go through the wards first? We can start with Ward 1, Alderman. We have Alderman Kevin Kavanaugh coming back, trying to get reelected, and he's being challenged by Jeff Nyhan. You got any commentary on that race?
You know, I'm not familiar with Jeff. I've worked with Kevin off and on. I happen to be an IBEW member, and Kevin is as well, and I've had a long history of working with him on many different issues.
Yep.
And
Of course, he's also one of our 3 state senators representing the city.
yes, he is unbelievably hard. I actually asked him to work with him towards being a guest on the show here, and it is just so difficult to find the amount of time and effort he spends in representing the people, not only of the city and the state, makes his time really difficult.
Yeah.
And Jeff, I can't comment. I mean, I'm glad to see that we have so many people willing to throw their hat in to public services.
Yeah, well, they won't have a primary. They'll go head to head in November. And likewise on the school committee, we have James Porter and Amber Jodwin, who will be the two names on the ballot in November for school committee.
No incumbent there.
No incumbent there. I can say that James Porter is going to be having a fundraiser, I believe, tomorrow night at the home of Kevin Kavanaugh. So you can, I'm sure he has a Facebook page or something. You can go take a look at that. If you have some time, you may want to attend the James Porter fundraiser, which is tomorrow evening. On to Ward 2.
So Alderman, we have two people that will be going head to head against each other, Will Stewart and Tyler Chase. And I am not from Ward 2, and I'm not familiar with either of those gentlemen.
Well, Will's been on the show before. He's the
On the
incumbent.
show. He works for Work Stay Play New Hampshire as executive director, and he's the incumbent alderman. And I think he's going to be a very strong candidate.
I think he will. He ran a good race last time.
Did.
And for school committee, we have Sean Parr challenging Kathleen Kelly Arnold. I believe she was appointed to the school board, and she's running for re-election. Do I have my facts right on that, Bob?
Sounds right. I'm not sure, but that sounds right.
And Kathleen Kelly, of course, has been Kathleen Kelly Arnold, of course, has been around Manchester politics for a long time.
She served on the school committee before.
Committee member for many years. So I would expect that she knows her way around her ward and may be quite a formidable candidate. And Rick, Ward 3, someone you may be familiar with. I don't know. Do you know any of those guys running for alderman?
Yeah, actually, I lived in Ward 3 for a while, and I'm actually back living in Ward 3 right now. And Pat Long, I've worked with Pat for like 20 years now, and you know we've worked to have him do the show in regards to the Charter Commission to be able to give the school committee the ability to be able to seek some financial funding directly and do some long-term funding if in fact they were able to have a body that was designed by the charter that accepted the education funding straight from the state. And there would still be city funding, but the two would be separate. And they could actually do some long-term funding issues, which is
Instead of year to year to year to year. And
yeah, it's been
folks who watch the show may remember we had Pat Long on a couple weeks back to talk in detail about that charter commission. We'll get to hopefully we'll have time to get to the list of names on that. I want to kind of stick with the format and go through the
Daniel Heck is running, and I'm not familiar with Daniel, so if anybody's met or knows about him, I'd certainly appreciate.
I don't, but I think Pat's a real contributor, and he's, of course, the
former alderman.
Former alderman, and he's the chair of the legislative delegation representing New Hampshire.
And for school committee, we have Karen Sewell and Mary Gwanda George. Mary George has been on the school committee and is running as an incumbent. Ward 3 is a real compact ward. It tends to have a very low turnout during these elections.
No, it's the downtown city ward.
Yeah.
Although it extends up River Road quite a ways, but it's mostly downtown.
And so it's if you're walking around knocking on doors, it's really a dream because it's very compact. Unlike your ward, Bob, Ward 12, which has those vast expanses of countryside. And
right.
And as a matter of fact, my Ward 8 also in the south end has some areas that are pretty wide open, as does Ward 6 out toward the lake.
Right.
So it's a good ward to campaign in. Mary George has been around a long time. She's got some pretty good name recognition, but anything could happen because the turnout is generally kind of low in that ward. So one vote goes a long way. So if you're in that ward, get out and vote because it makes a big difference.
I want to share something about that. Last election cycle, Pat lost by like 5 votes, and I
Right.
had moved. It was my wife, myself, 2 of my daughters, and we actually took care of a
So you're to blame.
handicapped adult. That was 5 of us that moved out of his
Ouch.
ward. He lost by 5 votes.
That was Tim Baines, who's not seeking re-election.
Yeah. And who, by the way, is endorsing Pat Long, which I think is a pretty
That's a
class
great-
move
that's
because
a great move.
they had a pretty tough fight against each other in the last cycle. So that's the way politics should be, where you can have a real tough fight, each taking your own position to heart really strongly, but then in the end, you can walk away as friends, you can shake hands because we're all trying to do good for the city of Manchester. Let's move on to Ward 4. This is 4 out of 12, about 1/3 of the way through. Another clash of the Titans. Former Alderman Jim Roy will be taking on incumbent Chris Herbert. Any comment on that, Rick? I mean, I think that is going to be quite a battle. They both know how to campaign. They're both gentlemen. I think they'll wage a high-minded fight, but I think it's going to be a fight nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Hebert posts a lot of stuff in regards to economics and the present development of economics and the ongoing development of that particular, you can almost call it a religion. The way it is.
Well, he calls it macroeconomics, and he does know his stuff.
He does know his
Yes,
stuff.
he does.
Yes.
I mean, I just got my Bachelor's of Science in Economics, and one of the things I was looking for was for the data in regards to macro, because we hadn't had the data to be able to support anybody's particular theory. And that data is just starting to become available and out there where they're actually developing the theory. So it's been interesting reading his information. And it's been a while since I've seen Jim, but he's a gentleman as well.
He is, yeah.
And on the school committee, we have Mark Flanders, who will be challenging Leslie Want. Leslie Want, an education activist who ran for the school board and won, and has been quite a vocal advocate for students on that school board, and very, very active, chairing committees. She's the kind of person you want on a board like that, I think. So on to Ward 5.
Geez, I only familiar with one name there. Marcus Pound Stallone is not one, but that's a gentleman running for office. Tony Sapienza.
Oh, come on, you can't live in Manchester and not know Sapienza. Holy cow. Eddie Sapienza called in to blast on me earlier in the show.
I've been trying to get a hold of him because he's on the, what was it, energy...
Energy technology and
not the committee, but on the contracts, energy contracts. And one of the things that they're looking to discuss with them is the solar installation of solar at the former dump, and there are a few other projects that fall under that forte.
Yeah, we're dependent upon this override vote of a veto for that to go forward, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but
That'll come up in September.
I've been wanting to mention that quite a bit lately. So there's an override on net metering.
Yep.
Important to the city, our city, and
Very important.
several other cities as well.
Yep. Yep.
Cameron Barr, I mean, these three individuals, other than Tony, that I'm wishing to get a hold of him, and I know he's a present alderman, I'm not familiar with them.
well, I'm going to have to say Tony Sapienza has lived in that ward his whole life. He's a very activist. Alderman, he does a very good job representing his constituents. He calls people back. I think both Mr. Ponce de Leon and Barr and Cameron Barr are going to have a tough fight ahead of them to unseat a guy like that. Tony does the things that aldermen need to do. So I'm really thinking that he's going to be fairly secure. And from my money, I hope he is. On the school committee, we have Jeremy Dobson challenging, I believe Lisa Freeman is the current incumbent. I do not know Mr. Dobson, but Ward 5 School Committee has gone back and forth. It hasn't been a comfortable seat for any candidate for some time, and I think that ought to be a very interesting race. Any other comments on Ward 5 there, Rick?
No,
We're doing a grave disservice. We're skipping through, and I'm sorry to do this to all you folks who signed up to be moderator, clerk, and selectman. These are the jobs that they're unsung heroes. They're the
really
people
are.
that run the elections, and we run elections here in New Hampshire better than anybody else, and that's, you can look it up. That's not baloney. We don't have the kind of election problems that a lot of other states have had, because we have a very good system in place. We have very good election laws, although there's been efforts to tamper with them as far as voter turnout and voter suppression. But as far as getting the elections done, the laws are good. But it's the people, the moderator, the clerk, and the selectmen, and the ballot inspectors who volunteer, come in and work these elections that really get the job done. So we don't mean to slight any of you, but we've only got a few minutes, so we're going to stick to the candidates at the top of the races. We move into Ward 6, and we have Elizabeth Morrow and Jerry Gibson. That's Garth Caravo's old ward. He got unseated, and it looks like I think Elizabeth Morrow is the current alderman, and she'll have a challenge to hang on to that seat, I think. But if she does, she could be there for a while. And looks like we have a primary for school committee. William Bergquist, John DePietro, and Dan Bergeron, who has run before, will be competing for school committee.
I think Dan's the incumbent, isn't he?
I believe so.
Okay.
This is my old ward, Ward 7. Ross Terrio, Brenda Noyes, and
Noyes, yeah.
Brian Cole are running for alderman in Ward 7. And Brenda ran last time against Bill Shea. And actually, I would recommend that everybody within these wards to contact your local fire department or school and have a meet the candidate event. You can have these type of events. We did it at the firehouse on Somerville Street, where we invited everyone on the ticket to meet citizens in their local area.
Well, we're getting told to wrap up, so if you don't mind, Rick, I'm just going to blast through the remaining candidates just so that we don't slight anybody, and because we only have about a minute.
Let's get through them.
We're getting to the great Ward 8. Michael Porter will be running against yours truly, Michael Farley. We have the Battle of the Mikes down in the south end. I have a feeling that's going to be a real hard-fought race. At least I'm trying to prepare for it. I'm a little bit of a late entry, made my decision late, but we'll jump in with both feet, and we'll try to make a go of it. For school committee, we have the incumbent Jimmy LaHoo running against Peter Perrick, Memorial High School teacher. Great guy. A lot of people in the ward know Peter. I think that's going to be a tough race as well. Two people with some pretty good name recognition. Ward 9, Barbara Shaw and Danny Leclerc, running against Daniel Leclerc. And for school board, Candace Moulton taking on Arthur Beaudry. Boy, that should be a tough fight as well. Arthur's pretty rough, and he fights hard to win his seat.
And Candace is an outstanding person.
Yep, she's a decent person, and she should make a good run for it, but it's going to be a tough one. Ward 10, Alderman Bill Barry being faced by Ray Hebert. And for school board, John Avard will be challenged by Jane Bolio, perennial Paul in that ward. She's got some tremendous name recognition, does a great job as a volunteer for the city. That should be a very interesting race. Ward 11, there's a primary for alderman, Andre Rosa, Norm Gamache, and Russ Willett. Norm Gamache, the current alderman, Russ Willett, former alderman coming back. And for school committee, Brittany Leclerc Ping versus Nicole Leapley. And then finally, Bob, your ward, Ward 12, Keith Hirschman will be taking on, once again, Hassan Essa in a replay of last election's battle. And for school committee, Andrew Toland will be taking on Kelly Thomas. And as much as we'd like to get to that long charter commission list, I think we're running out of time, so we're going to have to pass on it. But as the summer rolls on, we will definitely be talking about the candidates. How'd I do? Did I make it in time?
You made it.
All
You
right.
made it. You
Time
made
to
it.
close the show, folks.
Thank you both. Great work. Okay, thank you both. Okay, we'll be back next week.
We will see you next week, folks.